Picture this. A robin lands in your backyard bird bath, wings flapping wildly, water spraying in every direction. It looks almost chaotic, this tiny creature throwing itself into the water like it has something urgent to take care of. Then, just as suddenly, it's dumb. It hops out, gives a quick shake, and glides over to a nearby branch. For the next few minutes, it runs its beak carefully through every layer of feathers before finally taking off. You've probably seen this scene play out so many times that you've stopped really paying attention to it. And like most people, you've probably assumed the answer is obvious. The bird was getting clean. Same basic idea as a shower. Wash off the grime, feel refreshed, move on with the day. But that assumption is completely off base, and understanding why it's wrong will permanently change how you see every bird that ever visits your yard. Welcome to Wings Explained. Hit subscribe before you scroll away, because what we're covering today is the kind of thing you can't unsee. We're pulling back the curtain on what bathing actually does for a bird. What's really happening in the moments before, during, and after that splash, and why your bird bath might be one of the most important survival tools in your entire yard. Stick around to the end. The last behavior we cover is so unusual that early researchers genuinely thought something was wrong with the birds doing it. They were very wrong. It turns out to be one of the most sophisticated pest control strategies ever observed in a backyard animal, happening in full daylight in yards just like yours. Number 1. What bathing is actually doing. Let's start with feathers, because that's what this is really about. A bird's feather isn't a simple flat structure. Running down the center is a main shaft, and branching off that shaft are hundreds of tiny offshoots, called barbs. Each barb has its own even smaller offshoots, barbules, and those barbules are designed to hook into each other, almost like the teeth of a zipper. When those connections are intact, the feather works. It gives a wing smooth airflow, traps warmth close to the body, and repels water. When those connections break apart, the feather stops doing its job, and they break apart constantly. Every time a bird squeezes through dense brush, presses into a nest cavity, or huddles at a feeder surrounded by other birds, feathers take mechanical stress. Barbules separate. The zipper comes undone. Here's where bathing comes in. Wetting the feathers makes barbule structures temporarily more pliable, more willing to snap back into place when the bird preens afterward. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Biology showed that bathing followed by preening restored feather alignment significantly better than preening alone. The water isn't washing anything off. It's resetting equipment. For a bird like a cardinal in the middle of winter, this matters enormously. Degraded feather insulation means burning more stored fat just to stay warm overnight, and that bird's fat reserves might only carry it through 12 to 14 hours of cold. A bath isn't a luxury, it's maintenance. Number 2. The danger window. Here's the part most people never think about. The bird splashing around in your bird bath. It is at one of the most vulnerable points of its entire day. Soaked feathers are heavy and aerodynamically disrupted. For roughly 60 to 90 seconds after a full soak, a bird's ability to escape a predator is genuinely compromised. Takeoff is slower, top speed drops, and the sharp, instinctive maneuvering that lets a small bird dart through branches at full speed becomes much harder to execute. Studies on escape behavior and small songbirds confirm that wet birds respond measurably slower than dry ones. And the hawks that hunt suburban yards, sharp-shinned and Cooper's hawks specifically, can spot and close in on prey in under 2 seconds. A bird that's slow to react is a bird in real danger. Birds are aware of this. Watch one bathing closely and count how often it stops mid-splash to lift its head and scan the surroundings. Research in animal behavior found that birds in higher risk environments spend significantly more time pausing to look around and significantly less time actually bathing, constantly recalculating whether continuing is worth the exposure. The period right after the bath is even riskier. The bird sits on a branch, wings slightly open, damp and largely still, working through its feathers section by section. A motionless bird with compromised feathers on an open perch is about as exposed as it gets. This is exactly why where you place a bird bath matters. A bath sitting in the middle of an open lawn, far from any shrubs or cover, forces birds to do a risky activity with no nearby escape route. Cornell Lab of Ornithology recommends positioning a bird bath within about 10 feet of dense shrubs, close enough for a quick retreat, but not so close that the cat can hide right underneath and ambush from below. The birds using your bath are accepting real risk every time they do. Placement is one of the few things you can actually control for them. Number three, dust bathing, a completely different tool. Water bathing isn't the only kind, and the second type is one that plenty of backyard watchers have seen without ever understanding what they were looking at. On a hot, dry afternoon, house sparrows will find a patch of bare, loose soil, maybe under a shrub or at the edge of a garden bed, crouch down, spread their wings slightly, and start flicking dirt up into their feathers. They work it in deliberately, shake it back out, and repeat. It looks almost identical to water bathing. This is dust bathing, and it serves an entirely different purpose: parasite control. Feather lice are small, flat insects that live inside feather structures and feed directly on barbule tissue. They're widespread in wild birds, and when populations go unchecked, they cause real damage. Research published in Parasitology found that heavily lice-infested birds burned noticeably more energy on maintaining body temperature than uninfested birds, because their degraded feathers were doing a worse job of holding heat. Water doesn't solve the lice problem. These insects have evolved to ride out water immersion without letting go. Fine dust, however, is different. When worked deep into the feather structure, it clogs the lice's breathing pores and physically disrupts their grip. Studies comparing birds with regular dust bathing access to those without found significantly lower parasite levels in the birds that could dust bathing. That bare patch of dirt at the edge of your garden bed isn't a flaw in your landscaping. To a sparrow, it's a health clinic. If your yard is entirely covered in dense ground cover with no exposed soil anywhere, the birds visiting your feeders are managing their parasites somewhere else.
Number 4. What happens after the bath? The sequence that follows bathing is where things get really interesting, and most people have watched it for years without knowing what they were actually seeing. After leaving the water, a bird preens, beak moving methodically through each feather section, working from one part of the body to the next. Most people assume this is just about tidying up, getting the feathers back in order. It's actually more than that. At the base of a bird's tail sits a small structure called the uropygial gland, sometimes just called the preen gland. As the bird works through its feathers, it periodically presses its beak against this gland, picks up a small amount of waxy oil, and spreads it across the feather surface. This is why preening takes several minutes. The bird isn't just combing, it's applying a coating. Preen oil does several things. It waterproofs the feather surface, preserves feather flexibility to reduce breakage, and according to research in functional ecology, carries antimicrobial properties that defend against the bacteria and fungi that can slowly destroy feather structure from the inside. Bathing prepares the feathers for this oil. Wetting the feathers softens them and clears off the oxidized remnants of the previous application, allowing fresh oil to distribute evenly and effectively. Without the bath, the oil sits unevenly and the benefit drops. Without the oil, feathers deteriorate faster and the whole system breaks down. What you're watching at your bird bath isn't a bird cleaning itself. It's a bird executing a structured two-step maintenance routine. Water first, oil second. On the only equipment it has to stay airborne, warm and alive. Number 5, hunting. The behavior that confused researchers. Now for the one that genuinely puzzled ornithologists. On a summer afternoon, you might look out at your yard and see a robin or a blue jay doing something that looks completely abnormal. The bird picks up a live ant with its beak and deliberately rubs it across the surface of its wing feathers. Then picks up another, then another. Sometimes a bird will simply crouch over an active ant mound and spread its wings, letting the ants move freely through the feathers. This behavior is called anting, and for a long time, no one could agree on why birds did it. The answer, as best as researchers can now tell, is formic acid. Many ant species release it as a chemical defense when they feel threatened. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology found that formic acid, delivered at the concentrations a bird can apply by pressing ants against its feathers, has measurable toxic effects on feather lice and mites. The bird isn't playing, it's using the ant as a chemical delivery tool. It provokes the ant's defensive response and uses the released acid to target the same parasites that dust bathing addresses through physical disruption. What makes this even more striking is how deliberate it is. Research published in Behavioral Ecology found that birds selectively chose ant species with higher formic acid output over species with lower concentrations. The bird isn't just grabbing any ant nearby, it's selecting the most effective one. When anting was first widely documented, some researchers suggested it might just be pleasurable, a sensation the bird sought out with no survival purpose. What we now understand is that it's one of the most targeted, chemically specific parasite management strategies ever recorded in backyard wildlife. It happens on ordinary summer afternoons, in plain sight, in ordinary yards. It looks like a small bird having a strange episode on the lawn. It is the exact opposite of that. What you've been watching at your bird bath is not a simple animal doing a simple thing. It's a bird running a carefully ordered maintenance sequence, under genuine predator risk, using behavioral strategies shaped by millions of years of pressure to keep its feathers functional, aerodynamic, waterproof, warm, parasite-free. Your bird bath isn't a garden decoration, it's infrastructure. The water depth, the texture of the basin, the distance to nearby cover, every detail shapes whether the birds in your yard can actually perform the maintenance that keeps them alive through cold nights, cold mornings, and everything in between. The next time you watch a robin drop in, thrash around, hop to a branch, and spend 5 quiet minutes working its beak through wet feathers, you'll know what you're really seeing. Not a bird getting clean, a bird running its systems, doing what it has done every single day of its life, with instinct and chemistry and equipment far older than your yard, your street, or any human structure within view. Drop a comment below. Do you have a bird bath? Where is it placed? And who uses it most? I read every single one. See you in the next one.